The Sukuna onslaught continues, and this week it is Maki's turn and she's absolutely cooking. Yet again, JJK is going crazy with these chapters, so let's just jump right into JJK chapter 252. The chapter kicks off with a flashback between Kusakabe and Ino as they're looking into Yuta's barrier from the outside. They both mention how Yuta had shifted the coordinates of his domain, which I thought was pretty interesting since we know this is something that Hikari could do, but hadn't seen it utilized anywhere else in the series. So I guess this must be an ability innate to any high-level sorcerer with enough control over their domain, and would make sense that a Jujutsu prodigy like Yuta would be able to do something like this. Ino also adds how it would have been better to have more people inside of the domain to face Sukuna, and had actually planned to have Choso inside of there as well. Kusakabe mentions how that would actually work against them now, because if anyone were to enter the domain, it would immediately be recognized by Sukuna and their intended surprise attack would fail. We then cut to Maki getting ready to infiltrate the domain when Ino hilariously comments that Kusakabe could join the fight too and help out if he wanted. But in classic Kusakabe fashion, he pretends like he doesn't hear this and cheers on for Maki instead. You know, I'm really glad with all the terrible and sad things happening in the manga recently, JJK still leaves just a tiny bit of breathing room for some humor here or there, and that he's not completely allergic to happiness. Maki, then looking like an absolute beast, gears up for her surprise attack on Sukuna, with Kusakabe giving a signal when he's at his most relaxed. So what I believe is happening here is Kusakabe knew that Yuta would either lose or deactivate his barrier, giving Maki a chance to attack. So with that setup out of the way, we cut to the present where we see Yuta, Yuji, and Rika getting sliced by Sukuna's world-cutting slash. Crying with tears in her eyes, Rika carries away a heavily injured Yuta, and we see Wee immediately appear to take him away to get healed. Okay, so this is a huge relief and something I was scared about based on the events of last chapter. I think that although Yuta is heavily injured here, we see that he's immediately getting treatment, and additionally he's most likely trying to do all he can to heal himself with his own reverse curse technique. And the fact that Rika is still manifested is a great sign, but seeing her cry like this is such a sad image to see and one of the most heartbreaking panels I've seen in JJK. And as much of a minor character Wee is, I have to say the utility of his curse technique can't be understated. The fact he has the ability to instantly transport people to and from the battlefield is something that's so valuable to all the Jujutsu sorcerers, as we've seen with Gojo, Higuruma, and now Yuta. Now cutting back over to Maki and Sukuna, we see that she tries to essentially cleave him in two, but the King of Curses quickly dodges it. Alright, so I think this is what we were all kind of curious about, given the chapter before, Maki's sword was directly through Sukuna's chest. All it would have taken to kill him would be to either lift the sword up or down, but we see in this chapter that he quickly escapes this. When it's then told by the narrator that Sukuna's injuries from Maki don't heal as fast as they do from other attacks. Alright, so huge news that we get from the narrator here, which also leads me to believe that I think Maki will ultimately be the one to potentially kill Sukuna, or separate the two souls between him and Megumi. He then reveals that when Maki cuts a person's soul with her katana, you aren't able to normally heal the wound with reverse curse technique. So basically by having the soul split katana, Maki is the same as Yuji, where she can directly weaken the barrier between the two souls and ultimately separate them, with the additional benefit that her wounds last much longer than anyone else that has fought Sukuna thus far, even Satoru Gojo. And on top of this, Sukuna is already gassed, having run the gauntlet of tons of sorcerers at this point. The narrator then says in order to heal the soul, one must clearly see the outline of it, and even though Sukuna has a grasp on this due to being in Yuji's body, the reverse curse technique to heal the body is different than the one used to heal the soul. Alright, so this is some really cool information and reinforces the fact that soul-based attacks are essentially in a tier of their own. And I think this all makes sense because as Yuji was attacking Sukuna relentlessly in the last chapter, he was most likely using a special RCT to heal his soul, leading to his cursed energy getting drained at a much faster rate. But then we cut over to Yuji, where he's determined to get back in the fight against Sukuna and motivate Megumi to not quit here. Suddenly falling to the ground and coughing up blood from Sukuna's last attack, it's revealed that Yuji has been consistently using RCT and hasn't healed himself properly. But then Big Brother Choso comes to the rescue and tells Yuji to calmly heal himself, pretending as if his blood vessels muscles were extending like roots of a tree, making an outline around his body. So it's cool to see that Choso is still active in this battle in his own way and now providing mentorship to Yuji after his main teacher in Gojo has died. Well, potentially. But now jumping back to Maki versus Sukuna, we see them darting around the battlefield when she tries to stab him again, but this time he grabs the katana itself. Then Maki uses the momentum of her step to basically judo throw Sukuna and then throws him into a nearby building. Alright, so this is insane and the Maki stocks are really increasing from this chapter alone. I still think it's crazy how powerful she got after fully realizing her heavenly restriction, but it's a power up that she very much deserved. We then see Sukuna slash the building he's thrown against and throw the debris at Maki. Sukuna then chants twin meteors before sending a slash towards Maki, which we know is one of the things he says before sending off the world-cutting slash. So perhaps this is an attack that's kind of in the middle between his base slashes and the full power world-cutting slash. But we see Maki react to this and outright dodge, which is absolutely insane and just speaks to how refined her senses truly are. Sukuna comments on how Maki has the ability to read his slashes much better than any of the Jujutsu sorcerers, and even the feeling of fighting her was the same feeling he got when he faced off against Mahoraga in Shibuya. Now, this is a crazy comparison that Sukuna is throwing out here between Maki and the literal beast we know as Mahoraga. It just seems crazy to me to think someone only with a heavenly restriction rivals the reading abilities of a Shikigami whose sole purpose is to do just that. But then we learn that although Maki's katana stabbed through Sukuna's heart, he's forcibly keeping it beating using his own cursed energy, which is something pretty wild to think about, but considering he's one of, if not the strongest of all time, this feat would seem pretty straightforward for him. And on top of this, the method he's using here is the same as when he ripped Yuji's heart out way back in the beginning of the story in the detention center. So Sukuna is just crazy, as it feels like he can easily adapt to whatever circumstances comes his way, but ultimately I feel like he's gotta wear down at some point, right? Then we cut over to Arame versus Hikari, a fight we haven't seen in a little bit, apart from the bits and pieces we've seen throughout the main Sukuna fight. Hikari notes that Sukuna's cursed energy is beginning to dry up, implying that he's been getting weaker as the fight continues. But Arame counters this, saying judging by his cursed energy wave, Sukuna has no interest in his opponents right now. She adds that they should all be ashamed that they weren't able to do better than their teacher Gojo, and that Sukuna still hasn't given it everything he has. Which, okay, seems absolutely insane to me, but makes sense when you think about it. As I've talked about before on my previous videos, we still haven't seen Sukuna's black box ability, nor have an idea of when he'll utilize it. What I think is kind of interesting is that in the final panel of the chapter, we see Sukuna silhouetted with emphasis on his tattoos. And that's where I believe his mysterious abilities all stem from. I agree with some theories that are currently out there in the community that each tattoo represents a different curse technique or ability, perhaps from people he's actually consumed. But those are simply my thoughts, and would love to hear yours in the comments below. What do you think will happen next in this crazy fight, and what else do you think Sukuna will pull out of his sleeve? If you haven't, be sure to check out my video outlining how strong Nobara Kugisaki would be if she lived past the Shibuya incident arc. As always, thank you so much to the members of my channel. Your support is really appreciated. Have a fantastic day, everyone, and I'll see you all in the next one. Stay curious, anime fam. Peace.